Hey everybody, welcome to Restorative Yoga. Hopefully you've gathered your props, but if you haven't, go ahead and take a nice minute to kind of gather everything. Yoga blocks or roll towels, we might use them where the blocks would actually be pressing against the body. So things like books would probably be less comfortable, although you could use books with a blanket draped across them. You also need a blanket, a ball, and a bolster or pillow stack. No strap necessary today. So for our class today though, after you gather your props, go ahead standing up. We're gonna start with our ball. We're gonna roll, I'll come up closer to the camera so you can see the placement on my back. We're gonna roll our shoulders, especially between the shoulder blade and the spine on each side. And we're also gonna take a little bit of a roll down each side of the back and roll out the hips. If you've been taking some of my classes this week, did a lot of hip strength work. A lot of, at least I felt it, I don't know if you did. A lot of shifting balances and things that really engage our glutes. So today's class, whether you took those classes or not, today's class is going to kind of focus in on releasing any lingering tension there. So to start, grabbing a tennis ball or something similar. I have a slightly larger ball today, but still squishy. Find a wall. Good luck. I know, especially at home, wall space is at a premium. You can do all of this rolling reclined on your mat. Sometimes that pressure gets a little bit too intense, personally. If you are going to do it reclined, you might also grab a block and pop it up underneath your sacrum on the low side, the way that you would do supported bridge. But for today's class, let me scoot over here so you can kind of get the gist of where we're rolling. We're really going to focus, oh, and the sun is super bright, so that's not helpful. All right, there we go. We're really going to focus on rolling on the shoulders and the traps, and in between the shoulder blade and the spine on each side. Really being conscious of not putting the ball on the spine. It's not comfortable. You don't really even want it directly on your shoulder blade so much as kind of digging up underneath it. I might actually also grab a slightly smaller ball. I'm not sure if this one fits between my shoulder blade and the spine. After we roll each shoulder, I'll kind of cue amount of time, but know that rolling is super individualized. Once we've done both shoulders, we'll move down and just kind of do a couple rolls up and down each side of the spine, and then work into the glutes, hopefully creating some mobility in any stiffness. So when you're ready, you can shimmy up to a wall, and I'm going to start with my right shoulder, but you need to match. I'm actually going to start under my shoulder blade. If you walk your feet out from the wall, you get a little more leverage into that ball. And I'm just kind of swiping and rolling underneath, kind of like making almost like a wonky smiley face, underneath my shoulder blade, around the edge. After I've done that a few times, I'm kind of almost cat shaping my back to kind of open up that space a little. I get a lot of short, oh, there, cool, found it. I'm gonna stay right here. Feel free to stay in motion. Get a lot of shoulder knots. And the ball really helps me reduce back pressure, as does aerial, actually. So when you're ready, you can continue moving up. Again, you don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time with the ball on top of the bone, but it might swipe across as you shimmy across the ball. We're really looking between one spot that's really sticky for me is between my spine and shoulder blade. There's also no points for grace when using balls against the wall. But really hitting some of those spaces. You might feel immediate relief. My shoulder has been tight So the side of my neck has also been tight, and that first spot I found, all of a sudden my neck was like, whew, I have a lot more mobility. So we'll spend another minute probably on this side. This actually, in the interest of time, this also might be when you kind of take the ball and do a little bit of rolling up and down the whole side that you're working on, right? So mostly focusing in on the shoulders, but maybe doing a couple rolls the length of the side of your spine. We'll hit the hip area, so we don't need to worry about that right now. Since I was working up, which is the opposite of how I usually roll, it turns out it worked for me. Found some much needed relief. Don't forget your tracks. You might move your ball and set it up on top. I like to get my feet pretty far away, so I got a little more angle to really dig in to my traps on that side. You might even get the top of your shoulder if you do that. And then as you feel like you've hit all the edges and spots that shoulder and that side of your body needs, we'll swap sides. You might pause, take a little shoulder roll, see how mobility has improved or changed, and then swap side. I am starting again underneath the shoulder blade, making that sort of wonky, what I envision to be a smiley face, but I bet that if I was actually growing on the wall, anything like that. And always, anytime you roll, when you've got tightness, obviously we tend to focus on the space where we know it's tight. But you always want to also give some attention and love to the good side, the side that's not hurting, because even if you've got more tension and tightness on one side, that means the opposite side is doing a lot of extra work. And so you want to be sure that as you create space where tightness was, that you kind of massage out the side that doesn't hurt. A couple of physical therapists, friends of mine, they actually, when they do a lot of physical therapy with their patients, will focus sometimes more even on the good, what they call the good side, because then it helps create space for the impinged or tight or tense or hurt side to heal. So just rolling it out. We spend about 5 minutes on the first side. So we'll spend about 5 minutes on the second side as well. And if you really need to creep that ball back over to your first side, feel free. I just did. I couldn't help it. I haven't had so much space over there. I couldn't believe it. Remembering not to press on the spine with the ball. And maybe that idea of that cat shape through the shoulders will really help you hit in good places. You can always, I'm bending and straightening my knees, so if your knees are not feeling that today, you could roll around, pause, move the ball up about 1 inch, and then start again. No need to put too much stress on the joints of the lower half of the body. You'll find pretty quickly each side needed something slightly different. That's some weird tightness on the outside of my shoulder on this side, it is not there. And remembering you can also, you got about 2 minutes here, roll up and down those muscles down the side of the spine. You can even sway a little, but just don't necessarily go across your spine. Especially the harder your ball is, the less desirable that action cross the spine or even any bones is. About 1.5 minutes probably left to go. So if you have it, you might want to swap to the tops of the shoulders. and those tracks. Many of us are spending a lot more time with our screens, whether that's sitting at our computer or hunkering over a slightly smaller piece of technology, be it our phone, a tablet, or a laptop. Those tracks might be pretty tender. Just be gentle. Probably got about 45 seconds to finish rolling out. So any final thing you need there on the second side. Then we'll swap briefly to rolling out the glutes. We're going to spend some restorative postures on our glutes, opening through the hips. So this will kind of get our hips ready for that action. Go ahead and step away briefly from the wall, shimmy and shake it out. And then again, yogi's choice here. And I'm going to head over toward this camera again so you can get a feel for where I'm suggesting rolling. So you might even think outer hip. You can shimmy your side of your hip up all the way around top of the glute and around. You can even kind of like pin it there and contract and release. Sometimes we do that with our feet on the ball on the floor. We're going to spend less time on each hip since we are going to do some restorative postures for them today. But we'll probably still spend about 2 minutes on each side. So I'm going to start getting the outer hip up against the wall. And again, I'm getting some leverage. My opposite foot is about 2 feet away from the wall. And I'm bending my knee closest to the wall. You can hold on and just kind of circle a little up and around. Getting some of that outer hip. You might feel some popping and release in your lower back here. You're massaging where the internal rotators connect, external rotators connect, where they all fall up there. Then when you're ready, you can kind of turn, and then you're really hitting the meat of the glute. I'm starting up high on the top of the glute, just doing some sort of like tail wagging, just swaying my hips, edge and back. And then because it's a ball, it's already starting to journey a little bit farther down, hitting more in the middle of my glute, which is pretty intense. Like I said, I got real excited about hip strength in our balance Wednesday and Friday. And then I taught my leg class yesterday, so this is quite sensational for me. Maybe take another couple swoops and swipes or circles. If you recall ever doing this at the studio, it was always when somebody walked by and they were wondering what it was we were actually doing. And then you might shake out the leg and swap sides. Again, this is a pretty short hip roll. That's okay. So I'm again starting with the side of my hip against the wall, pressing in, and it's completely different for me on this side. Like finding the outer hip was almost weird. And when you hit that outer hip enough, you might even feel some release down your IT band, especially happens when we've been doing hiking or running. That kind of feels pretty good. And maybe you've got that lag going from side to side as you massage from the top of the glute towards the bottom. But most likely you'll end up spending some time there in the center. And about probably 30 more seconds, give or take. I'm also feeling pretty intense relief in my low back now that I've kind of rolled through those hips. My back low, I didn't know my low back was tight, but it's definitely feeling a little bit more mobile now that I've rolled my hips. So you can finish out that roll, maybe we'll shake it out. We're going to bring ourselves over to our mat, or maybe you have a pillow set up near the wall, and that's fantastic as well. We're going to settle and kind of ground into our practice. Like just come into a comfortable seat. Maybe that seat is on your pillows or blanket or bolster or blocks or whatever you've got. Maybe it's directly on your mat. Just giving yourself a moment to settle into the space. That rolling is the most work you're going to do in class today. So maybe you close your eyes and pause, noticing how the shoulders and hips feel now that you've rolled against the wall. Maybe it's a little bit easier to stack those shoulders over your hips. Maybe your spine feels a smidge longer. Maybe your neck feels a bit more mobile. And just pausing. Maybe we're doing a little bit of fidgets or wiggles or shakes just to see how the body felt. And now bring yourself to some stillness. Maybe you close your eyes. Maybe you set an intention. Perhaps that intention focuses on meeting yourself where you are today. Resisting expectation. Just being in the posture. Allowing the body to settle in and reap the benefits of our static, supported postures. And get it, sometimes it's hard to sit with yourself. Just see what happens. You might become aware of different sensations, energy shift, and tension relief. Inhale, arms reach high, palms meeting over top. Exhale, hands to heart center. Taking 2 more nice deep breaths together. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, hands down. 1 more. Reach. And release. As we shift in to 2 hip openers, we're going to focus in on the external rotators with our first 2, although one of them sometimes also targets our internal rotator. Then we're going to settle in, just give me a, that overview. Then we're going to settle into a little bit of internal rotator and inner thigh stretch. Then we'll see where we're at to kind of close out our practice. So to start, we're going to start with a little bit of 90-90, which I know is not everybody's favorite, me either. So that's why we need all our props. So personally, I like to use the short edge and the corner of my mats kind of as a guide for the setup of this posture. So a couple things you might think about, you could create a little bit of a cushion or a gentle, maybe like a fold. I'm gonna fold my blanket into thirds. It looks like a very smushed burrito versus the roll. And, or maybe a calzone. I'm hungry. And I'm gonna set that a little bit behind, about what I would say is the length of my knee to hip, from the short edge of my mat. And I'm gonna kind of shimmy myself up, and I'm gonna set my hips on that fold. Then I'm going to line my, I'm using my right leg, so I'm not working as a mirror today. Line my right leg up with the corner. So my shin bone is mostly in line with the front of my mat. And my femur, my quad, is lined up with the long edge of my mat. Then I get this other foot, my left foot, and drop it across. You can shimmy it a little bit farther. Sometimes that ankle is super uncomfortable on the quad, or maybe you're okay with the foot. Now, I am not making a 90-degree angle with my left leg quite as well as right, which is okay. You could shift it a little bit farther up. This is where your rolled towels or blocks might come in handy. You might have a block underneath your top leg. Maybe your shins just line up straight like fire logs and you are so comfortable in this posture, and if so, I am so happy for you. It has gotten better. We've been doing it pretty regularly in our online restorative class, and I'm noticing a difference. I hate 90-90 rests. So you may stay upright. Yeah, this may be plenty. And if you don't need that cushion, feel free to scoot it out of their way. But we're going to transition from here eventually into a pigeon pose. And you might find that that cushion helps you feel squareness across the hips. So as you sit here, the first thing you want to check in with is your spine. Have you rounded through the low back? Are you still long? Crown of the head all the way to tailbone. Shoulders are still ideally stacked over hips. So we'll just breathe upright for about 3 rounds of breath. Inhales are helping you create space. Exhales might deepen the hip opener. If this isn't doing it for you, maybe you want to start reaching forward. You could grab the other block and reach it out and down. That action helps you keep the low back long. You could shimmy that block out. You could grab your bolster to create a little bit of softness so that maybe your forehead rests there. We got about another minute here. Surrendering into the posture, letting the props help support you. A couple things to know about this 90-90 posture. Most likely, you're feeling it on both external rotators, right? You may feel it more on one leg versus the the other. For some, the top leg is more intense. For others, the bottom leg. Remembering as we pause in postures, that we're shooting for sensation. Feeling something in our body. Moving past the reaction to the posture and allowing the posture to take hold and affect the body. If you've hinged forward to an extent, you can walk yourself back up. You might shift your bolster out of the way a smidge, but you might need it, so don't let it go far. If you have a block underneath the top leg, you might scoot it out of the way. Oh man. You might notice, I did, my top leg just dropped right down. So there's that. And then you're gonna take the top leg and just shift it off for a second. You might even put the bottom of the foot onto the mat and pull your bottom ankle a little bit closer to your, so for me, I pulled my right ankle toward my left hip. My left hip is my top leg. Then you might rock over to the right, swing your left leg behind, and roll back over the knee. So the big toe, the shoelace side of the foot, and the kneecap are facing the mat. And you're in pigeon pose. How'd you pull that ankle in so that you're not forcing into that depth of pigeon? Now, if you like pigeon or need pigeon with the shin bone parallel to the short edge of your mat, feel free to return there. And you may want to pause in a little bit more of an upright pigeon here, pressing through the hands. And again, reaching forward when you're ready towards sleeping pigeon. Maybe you bring your elbows down on the mat. Maybe you use your hands as a pillow. Maybe a block or a bolster serves you better as a pillow. So here, you're still definitely targeting the external rotator of the front leg. But you might also be finding space in the hip flexor of the extended leg. I find actually if I stay up looking to my elbows and I pull my chest forward just a smidge, that micro action gives me a nice deep stretch, engages a little bit through my core to protect my lower back, and opens through my hip flexor. Remembering we're meeting ourselves where we're at today. We're not shifting into the pigeon we think we should do. We're settling in to the perfect pigeon for today. If you do have any knee, hip, joint injuries or old or new, feel free to recline and hug your right leg in. You could take figure 4, threading the hand and pulling in that way. And as you're ready, you can kind of lean over to your right side so you can swing that left foot. Feel free to help it go long in front. Plant the left foot, guide the right knee up. Hands come behind you. Just take a little bit of a windshield wiper. Giving yourself a little bit of time between sides. And then good news, we get to set up for the second side. So this time I'm lining my left hip up. I got my knee at the corner, shin across the front, quad across the side. Right ankle comes up and across. Maybe it shifts down. If you've got an extra blanket handy or you're not sitting on your blanket, feel free to pad underneath that right foot. You might notice right away a pretty stark difference. One, we've already done some pretty good opening of that right hip. So you might find that you don't need a prop underneath the leg like you did on the first side. And that's okay. Or maybe you're like, whatever, mommy, I need more of a prop. Feel free, you can go high side, medium side, low side, couple of blocks, a bolster, whatever you need here. I will say, even today, my right knee dropped right onto my foot, but I'm gonna actually use the block under my thigh like I did on my first side. It helps reduce a little bit of knee pressure that I was feeling. Let me pause for those first couple of breaths. As we acclimate to the posture, 90-90 is pretty intense. And so sometimes we have to let the body react for a few rounds of breath before we can settle in. Then you can start making decisions about how you settle. Just remembering we're not dropping back to go forward. We're staying long and walking it forward. That's why that use of the block is kind of a nice reminder here. Maybe you stay here. I think I use my bolster for 90-90. What are you feeling? Back to. Just meeting this delightful hip opener. And seeing what benefits the hips will reap. Maybe you find some tension to let go. Maybe you found that you've been extra stressed recently. So hip openers may be a lot for you. That's okay. Let yourself dial it back a smidge. Use an extra prop. Give your hips time to find some openness. You can walk yourself up, right? If you took that hinge, you got a block under a quad, you can shift it out of the way. And before we transition to pigeon, go ahead and bring the top foot for me, that's my right foot, planting it on the mat and pulling the other foot closer to the hip. Just to protect the hip and the knee in particular as we transition to pigeon. And you can rock over to your left side, swoop your right leg behind, then crawl yourself back forward so that the hips square over that cushion. And you see how pigeon feels. And as you're ready, you can go forward and down. Props are always a great option. If the blanket under the booty cheek is not enough, feel free to add a block. You could even, if your hip isn't squaring very closely, you could fold your blanket back up to meet your hip. As you settle for your second side of pigeon. If you happen to naturally be an over stretcher, or even if just hip openers are easy for your body, be sure you do have a little bit of low ab engagement to help keep the hips square so you don't stretch beyond your rotation. Then you're still targeting your mobility, but you're keeping the hips aligned and staying square as you open, which is safer for your joint. It's easy for some people, usually me, to lay into a stretch like pigeon too far. And it feels good until it doesn't. You can gently walk yourself up. Shift the weight over to the left so you can swing and guide that right foot back around. Help the left knee up to meet it. And windshield wiper. Just stay where you are. If you're on your blanket seat, stay there. And extend your leg back forward. Just give your quads a little bit of a jiggle, which might shake your feet. We're going to take a brief hamstring stretch just to give our legs a moment where our knees are not bent before we switch into half frog. So for me today, I'm just going to grab my bolster and put it across my calves. I'm going to reach my arms up and hinge over toward my bolster. My elbows are going to meet first, and maybe my forehead. So I'm not going for the depth of stretch. You could slide your bolster back. Then we'll stack it up and set up for our half frog. So for this one, I am going to turn toward my long edge of the mat, just I feel like that might be a better line of vision for you. I'm also going to spread out my blanket. I very rarely teach full frog. It's very easy to put a lot of pressure on your low back. See many a dancer injure their back by doing full frog and then bending at their low back, reaching up because they have a lot of mobility in their low back. So I tend to shy away from it for a variety of reasons. Another is that it puts a lot of pressure on my inner knee, which is why I have my blanket spread out. So for this one, we're going to come to our bellies. So feel free to pad as you need and roll down. And shimmy around so that however you're on your mat, ideally both knees are feeling some comfort. We're going to come up into Sphinx. And I'm going to take, I know I could be your mirror, but that's just going to confuse me. So I'm going to pull my right knee up so that it is directly out from my hip. And my bottom and my shin is directly down from my knee. So if you were standing behind me, you would see a pretty solid right ankle. Now you can stay up on your elbows. You could also reduce any tension in your low back by bringing the forehead to the hands. So this is sort of the position when we're standing and we bring our knee forward. And then we open the knee out, that hinge out. This is that plane shape. If you don't have any tension in your low back, you can stay up on your elbows, but feel your belly button pull towards your spine just a little bit as you open through that inner half thigh. If the 90-degree angle is uncomfortable, you can pull your heel closer to your glute, and that will probably reduce some pressure for your knee. Most likely you're feeling some sensation from the inner hip down the inner thigh. If you haven't already, go ahead and bring the forehead down and just pause. If you're feeling real feisty, you could extend that leg out to the side. Ideally, it stays in line with your hip. You took that extension, bend your knee, and extend the leg long beside the other foot. Coming back to your elbows, left knee shimmies up, hip height. Your elbows are just about under your shoulders, by the way. We take our second half of frog. And then bring the option to pull the heel to the glute or surrender fully to the mat. You can also stay on your elbows. If you liked that extension option, I do suggest bringing the torso down as you kick the big toe in line with the hip and knee. If you took that leg extension, bend the knee, and extend the leg back down. You can shimmy it out. And then push yourself back for a brief child's pose. We're going to make our way onto our back. We're going to hit almost all sides of our hips at this point. So yogi's choice here, you can use a yoga block on the medium or low side, or your pillows or bolster for this option. We're going to start in supported bridge once we get down there with 2 feet on the mat. So we bend the knees, catch behind, recline. Then make sure your prop is handy. Pressing into the feet, you'll lift the hips up so that you can shimmy your prop underneath the hips and sacrum. Arms can kind of reach out in a gentle T. So we've hit the external rotators, we've hit the inner thigh. Now we're going to really target those internal rotators, hip flexors. So maybe you keep both knees bent, or maybe you extend one leg. Big, deep belly breaths here, open through the front side of the body. Exhales, drop onto your front. And bending that knee and extending the other leg. Slowly opening one side then the other to start. You just want to be sure tension isn't accidentally settling into the low spine. Continuing those deep belly breaths as you expand the front side of the body. And sighing it out. Or breath. Slowly exhaling through the nose. You have each choice. And bringing both feet planted on the mat and deciding what your next move is. Perhaps you explore two legs extended, or maybe you go through one leg and then the other once more. When we're halfway through, I'll cue you to swap sides. Here, you just want to be careful of your low back. That deep belly breath is a great choice once more. You're doing one leg, go ahead and swap sides. Bringing both feet planted on the mat, pausing in your supported bridge. Then pressing the feet into the mat, suit your prop out of the way as your spine articulates and pauses on the mat. If you need, feel free to take some windshield wipers of the knees from side to side. Maybe it's just gentle hip stays. And then gently hug your knees to the chest. Maybe you rock and roll here. And let the knees drop to the right. Taking a spinal twist here. Maybe the gaze over the left fingertips, the left shoulder. Melts onto the mat. The knees lift up and over, dropping to your second side. The knees come center. And you can gently make your way back up to a seat. So if you would like a traditional Shavasana, feel free to go ahead and set up for that. Or perhaps you might feel as so inclined to take a heart opening and hip opening Shavasana with our delightful recliner. So if you've got blocks or rolled towels, you can set them up to create a slope with your bolster or pillow stack. And then you can grab your blanket. We've done a lot of hip opening, so you may not need the support, but it's nice to have it ready in case. This time you're going to take I have my blanket folded in half. And then a kind of longish roll. And you can just kind of have that handy in case you need it. And then just shimmy your hips up to the base of your bolster. And so 2 options here. You could set the upper body first and then set the legs. Or maybe you set the legs and then the upper body today. So if you're going to take the hip opener, the bottoms of the feet come together. And this may be a great comfortable position for you. And that's great. Or you can drape your blanket across your feet and let the sides of that roll support under your knees and thigh. Then you can recline back. Settling in to nice supported hip opener. We're not putting too much pressure by adding the supports onto our low back as we settle in. Feeling free, of course, to keep the knees straight or up to the ceiling. Or simply fully reclining. You could continue with reclined goddess legs if you so choose. As you just allow yourself to simply be in your posture on your mat. Feeling tension letting go, particularly in the hip flexors. Making sure the quads are loose. And the face is gentle. acknowledging any anxieties or discomforts that surface, and then sending them on their way. Allowing your mind and body to be more at ease in your Shavasana. As you settle, allowing your breath to move at its comfortable pace. If the mind drifts, just simply call it back. And if you're ready, you can begin to deepen the breath, standing across the belly as you inhale, releasing over the props as you exhale. You can find some minor movement, maybe a gentle sway of the head from side to side. And if your legs are in reclined goddess, you can guide the knees toward one another, pausing, and then gently stretching the leg long. Finding any other minor movements, toes, fingers, maybe circling or shimmying the shoulders around your props. And then we'll guide ourselves up slowly to a comfortable seat. Whatever that looks like for you. Pausing. Feeling length through the spine. Space through the shoulders. And release through the hips. Inhale, arms reach high, palms meeting at the top. Exhale, hands pause at your third eye as you seek openness of mind. They rest at your lips so that you find honest words and they settle at your heart as you arrive at a happy heart. Thank you for allowing me to be your guide for your practice. Namaste. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time.